what caught your attention over the weekend? Why don't we start with some of the winners of the weekend in your eyes, Whitey? And please join in 1300 736 736. We've got great prizes to give away for the best callers of the evening.
I think two stand out to me. I think what Port Adelaide was able to do down in Geelong off the back of a disappointing showdown was obviously incredibly impressive. Just the quality of football. But I think Essendon, Kane, and I know you did that game, didn't you?
I did.
Essendon? Yeah. And the thing for me is they are continually showing a resilience that I haven't seen in an Essendon team for a very, very long time. And what I mean by that is that when they get behind in a game, they're problem solving within it and finding a way to get themselves back into the game and then finishing it off, which I think is a sign of a really good team that's got a bit of substance behind them, not just a team that plays well when things are going their way. And as I said, that's not something I've associated with Essendon for a very long time. And I think they're now a genuine chance of playing finals and not just making up the numbers either in what I think is a really even competition. I think they're a team that is in the mix. And I would never have thought that.
No, I wouldn't have either. I'm not as high on them as others, albeit I say that and in the same breath say that I'm really impressed by what they've done because they've exceeded my expectations. The next fortnight, next 3 weeks is pretty good for them. Richmond and North, I think, in and amongst that. So they're going to win those two. What a position that they'll be in. I don't think they're top 4 quality yet. I worry a little bit about their forward line and their lack of key position players there, and maybe one short through the midfield, albeit they do have some depth as well with some players playing in the VFL. But I just don't see them as a top 4 side. But they're definitely a finals. They're definitely a finals team now. You can't miss from here.
Well, they shouldn't.
Well, they
It'd
can't.
be a massive unforced error if they missed from here. So if you had to pick one team at the moment that had to represent the AFL to go and play Mars, what that you would be the confident the most that it would be the winning team? Who is number one at the moment?
Sorry, reframe. What was the question? To go and play on Mars?
Yeah, well, we don't know what the conditions would be like in Mars, obviously, but who would be your number one team at the moment that you would trust above all other teams?
Which team do I have the most confidence in right now?
Because I think it's a very tough question.
I'm still really high on Geelong. I am.
Right.
Yeah, I think they're still, for me, probably the number 1 seed. I'm giving them a couple of outs for the last couple of weeks, but they're going to be in a pretty good position. He's not about now. He's about playing your best football in September. And I think no one has more of an eye on the bigger picture than Chris Scott and the way that he will manage his squad. Like Tui didn't play on the weekend. Like if you're serious, Tui plays in that game. If you're going to go all out and win, so their midfield is a slight concern. There's no doubt about that, but I think there's some protection mechanisms that he can use with that. And what other team could come back from 49 points down against how hot were Port Adelaide? No hotter team in a quarter of footy on the weekend, but you still never fully felt like Port Adelaide had that game in the bag. So it's Geelong for me. What about you?
I'm going with Melbourne. And I've been with Melbourne all year, and they drive me crazy watching them because I feel that they could play so much better than what they do. But for me, it's the trust in their top 6 players that I feel that in a high-pressure game, they are going to stand up and get the job done. I'm saying that with no confidence. And the reason I ask the question is I think it's one of the most open seasons I can remember where there is not a standout team that your default position is, they're the team to beat. I don't think you can say that about Sydney, even though they've only lost 1 game. I don't think you can say it with about anyone, really, because I think all teams have got holes and you're trying to find one that you can actually depend on, rely on. I find it a hard question to answer, but Melbourne would be the team.
All right, 0433 98 11 16. Which team of the 18 do you trust the most after round 9? You can send through your thoughts there. There are a couple of winners. Port Adelaide, Essendon. I thought the game last night was a winner in itself.
Yes.
I thought the round probably needed one more cracker. I thought the style of football that both teams played was attacking. They both tried to win the game of football, particularly late. There was ebbs and flows in momentum. I don't think either team ever had the game fully on their terms. There were some underrated performances. Archie was just magnificent with his 4 goals. I thought Payne with his 8 intercept marks. So a couple of unheralded players that we hardly ever speak about stood up in a big game. Love Michael Aney and what he does for the Crows and continually takes the big jobs. And then you had the Stars coming to play as well. I just thought Rankin was enormous with his 23 and 3 goals and 5 clearances. A loser for me is footy in Darwin. I mean, the biggest argument as to why you can't have a team in Darwin is the style of football that is played there. It's unwatchable.
Totally agree with you.
Unwatchable. So
Totally
it's the
agree
elephant
with
in the
you.
room that we're going to have a team in Darwin and the conditions are unwatchable and unplayable for the players.
Yeah, exactly right. And it feels like, and this has been happening forever, that as soon as a team gets far enough behind that they don't think they can win, they almost just totally combust, don't they? And then it just totally wipes out the rest of the match. You would have played
Played a
up
lot
there.
there. Played someone.
Why is it so difficult? The obvious is the heat, but what
Yeah.
makes it so hard and makes it hard to watch?
Oh, someone told me I'd played the most games there of anyone. Now
Is that right?
I'm sure someone has overtaken that. But yeah, we used to go there a lot. I played a lot of milestone games. Played game 200 there, and it's how damp the ball gets, and I think largely it's due to sweat. I was having a chat to Bucks about it off air, and he wouldn't mind me saying, he said, "Why don't they should play that at 1 o'clock? Like that needs to be the 1 o'clock game." He said he doesn't understand why they play that at night, but that it is a big issue, and I'm not sure what the answer. I'm not sure you can solve the issue unless you play the games in the day, but it's going to be pretty hot at times doing that. So, and another huge weekend of football. You are in fine form across Channel 7. Welcome into Sports Day as always.
Yes, thanks, guys. Kane, Whitey, I was driving in before and I almost crashed the car.
He's not happy with you, Whitey. He's not happy with you.
Melbourne, if you
I
had
know.
one team to pick
I know.
to go back and say this is the best, most confident team to play, you'd pick Melbourne.
Yep.
Who would
Mate,
you
But
pick,
you know
Hodgie?
why? You know why, Hodgie? It's not
I
necessarily.
don't know why. This is why I'm
No,
bringing it up. I'm confused. I'm very
They
confused.
torture me, Melbourne, because I trust their best 6 players, and I reckon they've got 6 players maybe in the best 25 in the competition. And I do trust them in big games that they'll make the right decisions and do the right things. And there's clearly a lot of improvement required in their method. I understand that. But I just feel that if I look through the other best teams in the competition, I don't think they've got as many top-end players as what Melbourne does.
All
So
right, Hodgie,
it's more in the
now
players rather
put
than
him on the
team.
spot. He's had a crack at your pick. Who's your pick, Hodgie?
Mine is Sydney every day of the week.
Why?
You look through and you talk about that. You say the bottom. Sydney have kicked the most points of any club. Sydney has the best defence of any club, have let through the least. So if I'm looking at a team to go across and play to show how good they are, I'm going for the team at the best at the attack, and I'm going for the team that are best at defence. I don't go for a team that has 20 more inside 50s than the other side. And I reckon Thursday night against Carlton was a pretty big bloody game.
You know
and
what-
for them to have 20 plus more, they gave up 5 goals in the first quarter. Yes, they fought hard back. If my life was on the line and I was picking a team, I'm not picking Melbourne, my friend.
All right, he's made a strong case. You could say that Hodgie's just taken the most obvious team, the one that's on the top of
But
the
I'm worried
ladder
about
right
Sydney's
now.
Hey,
forward
the-
line. I'm worried about Sydney's defence.
So defence. So if they've let through the least, that means their defence is the best. If they've kicked the most, that means their offence is the best. So I'm sitting there going, how can you be worried about when you've got Isaac? And you just mentioned about another bloke, Luke Parker, who's played 3 games in the seconds. He can't even get into this side because they're sitting there going, we're too bloody good. He's a former captain, All-Australian, BNF winner, and he can't get into our team. That's why I'm sending Sydney wherever you want to show who is the best team, and this is how you play our game.
Fair point.
They're fair
Strong,
points.
strong,
They're fair
strong
points.
point. Hodgie's coming off the long run. Usually I'm on the end of it. But suck in.
Kane's
Hodgie.
loving- Kane's loving it.
I just sit back. What do
Kane,
you
I've got you for after
No,
6, mate. I've got you for-
in my sights as well. Don't you worry about that. Luke Hodge and me going toe to toe on the other side of this Channel 7 commentary. I want to ask you a question, a hard hitting question about what I saw on Herd on Friday night, Hodgie. So,
Oh.
gee whiz, the text line is lit up. So why do you trust Melbourne players in big games? Then why have they lost the last 4 finals? I don't get much bigger than that, says Rick.
That's a very
What's
good
your
point.
response to that, Whitey?
It's the way they play
It's the way
that they're trying to change. I've been told.
so ask
They've been
Kane
trying for 4 years.
That's right.
why he picked Geelong and not Sydney. Ask him that. Yeah, I just have got a bit more faith in Geelong's front and back 6. Yep, there's issues through the midfield. I get that, but I just think they're rock solid, and I think the way that they'll manage the season is why I've got confidence, and they've got the best coach in the comp is a pretty good reason as well. Whitey says, Kevin, who are the D's tall forwards? They have none.
No, they don't.
No.
Well, so what? Serious question. What do they do with Petrarca after what he did the other night? Does he have to play more up forward?
What do you reckon, Hodgie? I don't think he has to do anything. I think the game dictates where he plays. You agree with that?
Yeah. I think with him, he's a person in those conditions. It's not his conditions, but he attracts it. He's got good hands, a great kick, and knows what to do when he gets the ball. But he's an amazing midfielder. So are you going to play him there a little bit more? Yes, but you're not going to change his role and put him down as a forward / occasionally in the mid. He's a midfielder. And then if it's rather than bring him off the bench, do you rest him at full forward? After seeing what you did on the weekend, but you also got to make sure that he doesn't have the biggest tank. He's not a Walsh who can come back in after missing a few weeks and run all day. You got to make sure that he's got enough energy to star in the midfield, because that's why he gets paid the big bucks. That's what he's there for. He can change the game through clearances, but also knowing as a coach to have the flexibility to put him forward, as Geelong used to do with Danger. If he was injured or couldn't get a kick or they needed something, have that flexibility to push him forward and do what we saw on the weekend.
All right, I want to ask you a tricky question before, no doubt, you've got a couple for me. You usually do. So the commentary on Thursday night, and look, BT's got an unbelievable, and it's not necessarily relating to you, it's more just the art of commentary, and Whitey, you can speak to this as well. BT is very good at sensing a comeback. Like, even when that game looked out of reach for Geelong, he always talks the game up of the possibility for a comeback. On Friday night, he did it a lot. He's the only thing that because I'm sitting there and I was just purely watching, almost like as a nuffy Port fan. I had my kids there. I had wasn't working, wasn't even really taking notes. Was just watching purely as a supporter. And my kids are sitting there going, "What? Why will BT just shut up with the comeback? Like, why does he keep?" And then James said, "If he kicks this, it'll get us back to 21 points." And my kids are going, "Get us back? You should be commentating neutrally on this game." We're like sort of losing our minds over it. Look, I think they do an incredible job. I'm one of BT's biggest fans, and James has done it better than anyone. And I think your role is important in that. Hodge, is there a responsibility as the broadcaster to maintain the viewership, even though on that occasion that could have blown out to 80 and game over? How do you assess that and trying to keep your viewers hooked as if something could happen that is worthwhile sticking around for?
Yeah, I think the main thing is to try and point out what could happen. And if you're watching the game and it's 50, 60 points and off it goes and there's no chance of coming back, I'd probably turn off and go and watch a movie or something like that. So I guess what BT's trying to point out, and he did it a few times on Friday night, but you could sort of see the game could change. Horne-Francis was amazing early. Butters was excellent. But they kicked 5 goals from clearances in the first quarter, Port Adelaide. And history is short with Geelong's teams. You can score against them from stoppage. You struggle to score against them from turnover. So if Geelong had been able to limit the impact from stoppage, the game could have turned. And then they throw Mullen onto Horne-Francis, who I reckon Horne-Francis hurt himself in the third, so that was a turning point as well. But Mullen went on to him, stopped his impact around the stoppage, kept him to 5 touches, very little impact in the last. You could sort of feel it was starting to. So I think what BT was trying to put out there was, Don't give up.
Look, he was right.
And this is Geelong. This is Geelong. They've got Cameron. They've got Hawkins. They've got guys who can score quickly. And they've got a record of, I think it's 39 and 50 from the last 50 games or whatever it is. They've got that record because they know how to play that skinny ground. It's not them. It's a ground that you need to know how to play to score fast. They can trap you in there. They can score from multiple ways. But it had that feeling there that if Geelong were able to shut down the burst from the midfield, then they could have the opportunities to come back.
Is it something he's right on this occasion. Like, it got to within Geelong could have easily won that game of footy. So he was right and his commentary was spot on. Is it something he just does naturally, or is it a discussion that you would have off air at quarter time? We've got to keep our energy up. We've got to talk this game up. We can't have people leaving, or he just does it because he's got the experience to do that.
Yeah, no, I think he looks at the team that's losing and where can they come back, and that's what he's thinking. If they're skillful enough, if they're a terrible team, he's probably not going to say that because he'll make himself look silly. But if you've got a team like Geelong or someone who can score fast, who can put pressure on, you point that out just so the viewers at home can go, well, hang on, maybe they do have a chance, and we're going to sit around and watch the rest of the game.
But Kane, as a broadcaster, like a commentator, like I do, you are always barracking for the team that is behind because you want a close game because it's fun when it's close. And as a caller, if a team's coming from 5 goals down, you do get quite excited and the momentum builds and it's a lot more fun to call that way. So a lot of people say, how do you call a game and not be biased? You're always barracking for the team that's behind. That's just a natural thing that I think you do as a commentator.
Jack Darling, who Tom was adamant was going to get 3 weeks for the hit on Bytel from Collingwood, which concussed him. I'm not sure if you saw it, Hodgie. You're nodding. You've seen it. You've got it up.
I'm looking at it right now.
Could you believe that was even discussed as a potential 3-week sanction?
Look, Kane, to be honest, when I first saw it, Oh, no, I thought he was in trouble.
Did you?
Just because of how safe they've gone with the head, and he wasn't coming in to tackle. And I think the only thing that got him off was the fact that they're saying that Cole pushed him. I don't think Cole gave him much of a push. I think he was leaning forward. But I reckon from what we've seen in the past, he didn't try and tackle. He just ran into and got him high. So looking at it now, am I glad he got off? Well, I don't think he had much malice to do it, but I actually thought he was going to be in trouble. That was my first opinion when I saw it.
So that's an issue, isn't it, Whitey?
I think it's a massive issue.
If I'm saying there's no way, Hodgie's seen all the other ones that players have been suspended for, and he's going, well, head knock, bump, potentially concussion, he's in trouble. Tom's saying, who follows it closer than most, 3 weeks. I don't know what you're saying after you've seen it, but we're all split.
Well, I thought he had no case to answer.
Okay.
Because you can have collisions and accidents on the football field. But I think the biggest issue we've got in the game culturally is that now whenever someone is concussed, the default position is, there's got to be someone that's got to be held account for that concussion. Collisions, accidents can happen on the football field. It's a collision sport. Sometimes it's no one's fault. And I think that was the case here on this one on yesterday.
Well, I think with Darling, though, Darling wasn't trying to tackle. I'm watching it now. He just ran in and collided in his head.
But he's allowed to stand there? But
he's running. He hasn't slowed down at all. He's running to put pressure on. And, well, as I said, that Cole's pushed him in the back, which I don't think had much of an impact.
He sort of stumbled down, though, didn't he? So his head ends up in a position that it wouldn't naturally be in, usually.
Yep. You sort of look back at the Sicily one with Hugh McCluggage last year, and then there was all reasons why Hugh McCluggage went to evade one of the, I can't remember who it was. There was another Lions player in the area, but another Hawthorn player in the area, but Hugh McCluggage has tried to avoid him, and then all his strength's gone away. Sicily had him by one arm, dragged him to the ground, and got 3 weeks. So it's one of those ones that I initially thought, he's in trouble, but he'll be pretty happy got off.
All right, Hodgie's with us, and I just won myself a premium bottle of Cobram Estate, if you don't mind. It's
what
the
sort
black,
of money
it's
we
the black
talking
label
here,
stuff. It's just magnificent. It's Australia's most awarded extra virgin olive oil. Hodgie, what happens when you're a skipper and you have an unbelievable CV like Toby Greene does? He's the reigning All-Australian captain, and you're out of form and your team's started to drop a couple of games they shouldn't have dropped. How hard is it not to go into yourself and worry about yourself when there's larger issues like the team performance you have to worry about as well?
I think he's mature enough to not get too down on himself, considering the position he's playing. Half forward is one of the hardest positions to play, and sometimes you are going to go out of form because you've got someone he would be getting the best small defender from the opposition trying to shut him down. Plus, they've played some decent teams, and you said there is a few issues with GWS and their ball movement, but I think he's mature enough not to start being selfish or not to try and do too much. Would I be asking to go in the middle a little bit just to drop the defensive bloke that's on me? Yes, you'd probably change up a few things like that. Could you start him in different positions, just so he is more around the ball? But I think he's old enough, mature enough to sort of know that he doesn't have to go and change too much. Sometimes you got to continue to do. Blokes will try and go and do too much in this position, and it turns out backfiring against them. So I'd be chatting to the coach about there's a few extra roles that I might be able to play, but I wouldn't be stressing too much. It's only been a few. Yes, his season hasn't been consistent, but GWS have only been down for the last couple of weeks.
Are either of you seeing anything from him that's obvious that he could be changing or he's doing differently to?
The only thing, and we interviewed him in pre-season, and he spoke how he struggled to get in the gym last year. He had an injury that really affected his strength, and he felt like he was wrestling a little bit too much, and he was better when he's sort of running and jumping and using that. And when he's right, when he wrestles, that's where I think he's beatable. And Kelly in wrestles and one-on-ones was terrific. When he can read it and when the ball gets on the ground, he just reacts quicker than anyone. He's like those Gary Ablett Jr., Nick Dacos players that just react to that ground ball. And he did it even a couple of times. He wasn't awful on the weekend. He kicked a couple of goals and it was a good battle. So I would advise him if I was coaching him not to get in wrestles and either run and jump at the ball or lead up and then try and turn your opponent around and perhaps have a squirt in the midfield as well. Hodgie.
Yeah, I agree, because as a defender, Toby Greene, because you know how exciting it is if the ball's there on the ground, he's someone who can get to that dangerous spot. If it's in the air, he can jump and take an overhead mark for a small fella. So as a defender playing against such a dangerous bloke, I'll be trying to wrestle. I'll be trying to just limit whatever you possibly can to take away his attributes. But as we said, I agree with you, Kane. Chuck him in the midfield for a little bit more, just to get a couple of those cheap touches, might get his confidence up and go from there.
All right, and you've got a trade target you think North Melbourne should have a crack at?
Oh, look, I was sort of sitting down and I watched this bloke on Friday night down at Geelong, and he's been moved out of the midfield because they've got a star-studded, and this is Ollie Wines from Port Adelaide. He's been moved out of the midfield. He was a Brownlow medalist. They've got Kane, they got Horn Francis, they've got Butters, they've got Rosie all going through there. So he's been pushed out for a draw. He's probably the bigger body they have going through there, but he's been squeezed out to play other positions. Clearly, he's still good enough. So Rosie out in the weekend, from the half that he played the week before when Rosie was injured, he was exceptional. He was really good on Friday night. He's got 2 years to go on a contract, knowing that I'm going to be probably on the outskirts. If we get another good midfielder in a draft or a trade, I could be out. Do North Melbourne go and throw him a 4 or 5 year deal on a lot of cash to bring him over to try and teach him, because he has been a leader. He's, as far as his professionalism, second to none. He's played a lot of different positions, and most importantly, which what I've looked at was, he's been big enough to step aside to let Rosie, Butters, Horn Francis jump into his midfield. It was his midfield. He was captain and he was playing on the wing. So he's been selfless enough to move across for the benefit of the team. That is a big attribute to bring to a young North Melbourne team who probably struggle for that older guys. That his mindset there wouldn't be for him to go and get 35 touches. He'd be playing in there, teaching them. Maybe teaching them a few tricks and a few other things.
Yeah, my initial response is I love it for North. I like it because it's not a Pendlebury type who's 35, 36. Like Ollie Wines is almost and should be at the peak of his powers in the prime of his career. What is in it for him to go and play at a team like North Melbourne? Well, it would have to take the security of a longer-term deal. So if he's got 2 years left at Port Adelaide, can he add an extra 3 years to his career and prolong his career? I'm not sure what he wants to do after football. He's from a Chuka, I think it is. So to get back closer to family might be an attraction for him. He should walk in and captain the joint. If he goes there, like instantly you'd make him captain. That's how impressive he is ever since he first stepped foot into the place at Port Adelaide. The only question that North fans might say is, well, do we need another midfielder? Well, we need a key position forward and probably 3 key position defenders.
It starts with the culture, Kane. It starts with the culture. You go out there and you get a bloke who's going to set the tone, for everyone. The person who sets the culture of that football club will set it for the defenders, will set it for the forwards, will set it for the midfielders. He's not just there to be a midfielder. He's there for just as much off-field and to teach the young guys. And as we said, they've had a lot of picks over the last few years. Teach them how to play AFL football. Teach them, away from the footy club, how to be an AFL player. That's why I'd be targeting him. And what is in it for him? He's done so much. He's won a Brownlow medal. He goes there. He could change the culture of North Melbourne. And look back, and in 5 years' time, if North Melbourne are back playing finals and deep in finals, he may be there, he may not. But he's the person who's gone there to change the culture of a team who's struggling and need help.
Yeah, we had one. Brad Ebert came from West Coast to us in 2011. Like, we're a genuine basket case. Like, won 3 games for the year. The following year, the coach got sacked. We lost to a bunch of kids, the Giants up in Sydney. Next day, Matthew Primus got sacked. The president walked out. Everyone left. Players got traded. And Brad set an unbelievable standard. And honestly, he was the one that changed training standards because his GPS number was plastered up on the whiteboard. And every player would run over and see how much high-speed running Brad Ebert had done. And I caught up with him the other day. I said, what were your recollections of that? And then only like 2 years later, we're playing in prelim finals against your mob and lost by a kick. And I just reckon he was really influential in that. So you're right, it can change, but it does sometimes take a player from another club to come in and set those standards for everyone to follow.
So, Hodge, you did that when you went to Brisbane. So were you just walked in first day and said, right, boys, this is how we're going to do it? There's a bit of mystique around the influence you had on Brisbane. How did you go about it? Because you went up there for cultural reasons, not to go and win a best and fairest and have 30 possessions every week.
No, look, the way I did it, totally opposite. I did it in a way that was not what worked at Hawthorn didn't necessarily mean it was going to work at Brisbane.
Okay.
What I had to do, and I couldn't walk in there and say, we won flags at Brisbane, at Hawthorn, we did this, because they're going to turn around and say, well, this is not Hawthorn, piss off. So that's I had to be careful on how it was. So if I did do any leadership stuff, it would be grabbing a person if I saw him do something and go and talk to him one-on-one. Using the younger guys as an example, one of them was on our pre-season camp to Tassie. I walked in after we were getting into the lunchroom, and every guy had a bottle of soft drink. And Andrew Russell, Kane, you know what he's like.
He did that trick with us.
If we had a can of soft drink at the footy club, he'd throw it on the ground, or he'll make sure you never did. So we just never drank soft drink because you're too scared that Andrew Russell would find us.
I haven't drunk a soft drink since. I just want to butt in. It's the same. So our first ever preseason camp, Andrew Russell put a bottle of soft drink on every player's table, set it up half an hour before we got to dinner. And then every player sat down in their place, and then he watched and took notes of which players actually drank the soft drink that he had planted there for people to drink. And then after the next day, he said, you had one, you had one, you had one. We are not serious. Now, this is a long, long time ago, and I honestly don't reckon I've drunk soft drink since. Who was the player, Hodgie? Who'd you have to pull up? Do you remember?
No. It was we actually got to the stage where we wouldn't have bacon, we wouldn't have anything. We'd have to have poached eggs on multigrain toast. Otherwise, if Jack walked in and saw us, we'd be too scared. But no, so I walked in after this is our first day, of our training camp, the first one at the Lions, and everyone there had lemonades, had soft drinks, because that was just the culture. That's what they did. And I sat back and I thought, how can I change this without stand up there, beat my chest and say, you shouldn't do this? Because I was an old man then. I was 33. All these other guys were 18, 20, 24. And not, I would have done the same thing if I was their age. So the next day I went up there and everyone was in line. It was like the old cafe style where you line up, get your buffet food and off you go. So I grabbed 5 waters and I went to the young guys. So I went to Camarena, went to Bailey, went to Starcevic, grabbed their soft drink and said, you don't need that, and gave them a water, hoping that it would follow on. The next day there was about 10 blokes who drank waters. By the end of the day there was about 6 blokes that drank soft drinks. So this is in the space of a 3 or 4 day camp. The one little movement there of sort of saying, if you're serious, you're not going to drink that. And then next thing, we'd go for dinner a week later with a few of the midfielders, this and that. There used to be jugs of soft drink put on the table. Now the leader would go up there and would put out jugs of water. Like small little things like that you can implement in just so people can take control. It can be their rules. You don't have to come in and say, do it this way or you're out. So small little things like that is the best way.
It's terrific. It's a great insight.
I caught something there, Kane, where you said back in 2011 it was a tough year for you. Did that make you reflect and think that footy isn't as easy? Have you been a bit harsh on Richmond?
Well,
Oh, don't worry, I've got something coming. So just
have I been harsh on Richmond? No, not from the weekend, Hodgie. I'm not sure anyone could be. I'm not sure you could find any positives from the performance. Is what I'm trying to say on the weekend. But you may have found one.
No. I was just more looking because did you say that it looked like the effort wasn't there, or they didn't care, or they didn't try?
It looked like they'd given up on the season. Was I think the words I used, and I said that's a dangerous position to be in because you speak from experience and you've been there. Like particularly for those players that some of them have had so much success. What's going to motivate them for the rest of the year? It's a tough spot to be when you've still got 15 games to go. And to me, it looked like they'd just given up on the season. So I think that were the words I used.
Yeah, guys, because I looked through your career, Kane, and there was a date, 13th of August 2011. You played at the MCG against Hawthorn.
Yeah.
The score was 31-11-197 to 5-2-32. That's a 165-point thrashing.
That's it. And check out the week before as well.
Hawthorn had 446 disposals. Port Adelaide had 286. That is 160 more touches than Port Adelaide.
I know.
How many did you get, Hodge?
You had one tackle, Kane.
Yeah, I know.
One tackle. There was 446 opportunities for you to tackle a Hawthorn player, and you had one.
No.
So don't come here on a Monday and start going at these Richmond players who are trying their hardest. Football isn't as easy as it seems from over the fence.
No.
You look at it, sometimes we've been in bad teams. I could go back. I remember we played Port Adelaide in 2003, and I think I touched the ball 8 times. We got physically beaten up by a really senior Port Adelaide team. And I thought back and gone, it looks like we're not trying. You try so hard when you're in a bad team. And yes, they got injuries, which isn't Ooz's fault because it's the list managers and stuff from previous years. But I think we need to sit back and go, sometimes when the new coach comes in, things aren't going their way. It's not as easy as it looks.
No, it's a good point. And if that was the precursor to anything you say in the media, you wouldn't comment on anything, though. You wouldn't have an opinion on anything. Like you couldn't actually... You couldn't have an opinion because someone could go back and say, well, you did this on this day. I got dropped the next week. I got threatened to be traded the end of that year. The only reason I didn't, delisted. The only reason I didn't is because I had a contract which saved me. But the only thing I will say is I guarantee the coach didn't go into the media conference after the game and say, I can't question our effort.
Yeah.
So I guarantee you that if that was a performance from any other team, that Adamuze can't sit there and go, I cannot question our effort. Well, I reckon you probably can question the effort.
So, Hodgie, from clearly someone who didn't play the game in myself, the observation of watching Richmond the other night was that there were a lot of premiership players in that team that looked tired, looked like, I've been to the top of the hill or top of the mountain. It's all got a bit hard. That's what it looked like. I'm not saying it was that, but that's the perception a lot of people are having about some of those senior premiership Richmond players.
Yeah.
Is that fair, or does that happen?
You'd have to ask the players there, but you look back, and I go back, and I know I was joking around with Kane in 2011, but Kane came up against a team that had a pretty successful side 3 years later, and he had a lot of teammates in that side that played in the 2004 grand final against Geelong. So there was a lot of senior players there. Richmond came up against the Bulldogs team, and Kane, we've spoken about time and time again how good the Bulldogs this are. If you give them time and space to do whatever they want to do, they will carve you up. They'll carve up a lot of teams. So I'm sort of sitting here going, sometimes when you're just a little bit off the ball, a really good team can make you look disinterested. And I've been there before. 2017 against for Hawthorn, we looked like that. We played, I think there was 3 games in the space of 6 weeks where we got flogged by Gold Coast up there, got flogged by St Kilda, and I think Geelong, all 65 to 75 point games. The team finished top 4 the year before. And it was just, we were a little bit off. We had some new guys into the side trying to change a few things, and we just looked outplayed and looked like we were disinterested. But we were trying. We were still trying as hard as we possibly could. So that's where I sort of sit back and, yes, we've got to give opinions, but when there's a team who, yes, injuries are there, yes, it's a new coach, yes, it's a new game style, we've got to sort of give them a little bit of leeway for the first year for Uz, I think.